Good evening, everyone. I will now call our August 12th, 2025 regular meeting of the Board of Directors to order. Welcome and thank you to those attending our meeting in person, joining us over Zoom, or staying engaged by watching a recording at a later date. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak tonight, during community comment, they will need to fill out a speaker form located in the back of the boardroom on the table to my left and turn it in to Board Secretary Kim Colvin, seated at the end of the table on my left. Comments will take place during the designated community comment portion of our agenda. I would also like to take a moment to introduce those seated at the board. To my right, we have Superintendent Degner, board members Sean Eystone, Charlie Eastham. I'm President Ruthina Malone. To my left, we have Vice President Molly Abraham, Director Jane Finch, and Board Secretary Kim Colvin. And with those introductions done, we will dive into tonight's agenda. First up, we have our ICEA update from President Brady Shutt. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Brady Shutt on behalf of the Iowa City Education Association. President Malone, Vice President Abraham, Directors, Superintendent Degner, Secretary Colvin. It's great to be here. This is one of the best days, I think, for all of us that we have because we welcome our new educators district. So I want to give a shout out. Nick Proud is, he'll be up here in a second. He did a fantastic job in the HR office getting that ready. You know, pretty pumped up and excited. We got to hear Superintendent Degner motivate them. It's always a pleasure. And it was a great morning. So welcome to the new educators. I want to also thank all the folks here who did all of the work through the summer to make the building office and the contracts and all of those massive amount of work, a lot of professional development and other activities this summer. They keep working. So please, to Kurt, please extend our thanks to all the grounds crews and all the buildings folks. I know they look amazing and we're going to screw it up very, very quickly, but we appreciate it. To the tech people, Adam, if you can pass it on to Josh too, that we love all the work that they've been going on, and it's a massive lift for them this year. So just a huge amount of appreciation for what everyone does to get ready for the arrival of the teachers and the educators and the staff, and then of course, fifth. To the families out there, you're probably ready for your students to come to us, and we are ready for them as well. So we're looking forward to a great school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, community comment. It doesn't look like we have any. Thank you. And we will move on for approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion?
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Board Secretary Colvin, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. Director Malone, yours hasn't registered. Did you vote?
What?
Yours did not register your
It
vote.
didn't pop up. So, but I'm
How would you like to vote? Thank you.
Sorry. I'm like, what?
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting.
Thank you. And next up, before we get into tonight's consent agenda approval, were questions from directors regarding the bills that were reviewed this cycle. Hearing none, is there any items that directors would like pulled from tonight's consent agenda? Okay. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
I move that we approve tonight's consent agenda.
Second.
All right. Board Secretary Colvin, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
What?
Kim, I'm a yay.
Thank you, Director Finch.
I'm a yes.
Thank you, Director Malone. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right. That takes us down to our first committee report. And Director Eystone, since Director Williams is not here tonight. Would you walk us through the policy primers?
I'll walk you through very briefly because what we have here is just some updates due to kind of some late legislative changes. There's just some wording changes, some definition type things. It's all reactive to changes from the legislative session. I don't think there's really large changes in any one of those. This is our second kind of pass at them. We didn't have anything taken back after the first reading to look at, so pretty minor stuff.
Sean, is this the review where we re-implemented the gender?
No, we voted for that last time.
That was last time, right? Okay, thank you very much.
Right. Were there any other questions or comments from directors? Hearing none, that takes us into our discussion items for tonight. First up is the IASB Delegate Assembly Rep. So as you know, we need someone to represent us at the annual meeting. And I remember last time I said it wouldn't be me, but actually it needs to be me.
Well,
But
then I suggest it be you.
I'm happy to do it. Since I sit on that board, there are responsibilities I have to take care of and most likely do. So I am more than willing to serve as that rep. But if other directors are in town for that, I think they have some pre-convention workshops, you can come and sit with me and maybe we won't go until 1 o'clock. But that's that. Next up is our legislative priorities. Directors will see that ISCB has their priorities listed. And we also took part in a survey to select the 4 top priorities that we would like to have submitted from our district. And those priorities ended up being preschool, teacher professional development, mental health, and supplemental state aid. I would open up the floor if other directors wanted to make comments or have a discussion.
The only thing I would say is it feels like it's a little different what they have sent us as what we fill out, where it lists every one of the priorities with a 1 to 7 rank of,
Yeah.
you know, how important it is. So I feel like instead of just giving like our top ones, we need to kind of rank them, or at least say that, you know, our, you know, the ones maybe we gave 5 votes and 6 votes to get a 7 on this thing, and 3 and 4 votes get a 6, something to that effect, because it's not just pick 4 of them
Yeah.
like it used to be.
Right,
I
it is
feel.
different this year. Yep, it's a different format for them.
So we have a whole bunch that have 1s, like 1 vote for a lot of them, and several 0s, and I think it's obvious what the 0s get. So I don't know if it's, you know, kind of break it into buckets, like 1s get like a 2, and then
Do we rate them all or just our top 4?
For the UEN,
Yeah.
it's different. Typically, what
Okay.
we've done in the past is just submitted their format is totally different this year.
Okay. So we do have to rate them all that we thought were priorities.
Yeah, I
Okay.
like that suggestion.
Yeah, I do too.
I think there's a section where I can add comments and I can put all that in there that these were voted on by all 7 board members. These are results that we got. I mean, we can,
Because Kim, we submit something different to ISB than we do to the certain priorities that get submitted, and then ISB is more of information based, right?
AASB,
Or
we
we-
select the 4. In UEN, they want you to rank
Rank.
each
Oh,
one.
sorry. Okay, so I
1
flipped
to
those
7.
around.
We
Yes, ISB we submit the 4, and then the UEN is the one where we.
want us to rank everything, yeah.
But I like that. I mean, if all of us voted for one, that's a clear 7, and
are they the same? I guess I didn't look. I'm scrolling through it, and they're similar.
Pretty much, yeah.
They're not identical.
yeah. Is all directors okay with that?
Yeah, I am.
All right,
Yeah, that's,
great. Well, that concludes the discussion on our legislative priorities. That us to ICE protocols for the day. And we turn it over to Deputy Superintendent.
I'll just give a little opener here, but yeah, Chase is gonna heavy lifting for us on ICE, and then also the legislative update next. We wanted to review ICE protocols. We know with folks coming back to our school campuses, there's probably some concern out in the community about how those will be handled. We've reviewed those a few different times last spring and towards the summer, but we thought it'd be important here in August to go ahead and address those again, and we'll share some information with you this evening. And we've obviously talked to our administrative teams and staff about these as well. So with that, I'll turn over to Chase.
Great. Thank you. Thank you and good evening. As Matt said, we have shared this information previously. Spent some significant time on our protocols and our approach with our administrators back in January and throughout the spring. And while we made a more robust presentation at that time, what we've utilized this summer is just a protocols that we've put in place. And not just the protocols, but also reminders to our administrators about what we can do to support students and families that have concerns. And we're not going to share all of that information or the documents that we've provided to our administrators this evening. There's a number of reasons for that. We're happy to have some additional conversation, but what we really want is that we do have some protocols in place should ICE appear at our buildings. And to give you kind of a brief overview of the step-by-step is that we'd ask our principals to take the lead in these and to meet the officer in the main office and check their ID and their credentials like we would any to our building, and also ask them to see a warrant or a subpoena. We understand they are law officials. Of course, we want to cooperate and collaborate when needed, but we also recognize that there are legal steps that need to be taken. And at that point, we've then asked that our building leaders call down to central office to get us involved to contact our legal counsel so we can continue to get the guidance that we would need if that situation occurs. And then we've told principals why we don't want them to be defiant, but to just let the officers know, hey, we've sought some guidance from our folks at Central Office Council. Could you please wait until I get a response from them, whether that's in the main office or even outside, and so that we can provide that. As I said earlier, we have instructed our principals that we do want them to follow the law, and that if the law officials say they have a legitimate reason to be there, we don't want to put our principals in the way of getting in a confrontation. And so while we do want to make sure that we follow the protocols that are in place and we check what we need to do, safety of everyone involved, we also have tried to make it clear that we do need to follow the law, and that if access needs to be granted, but our attempt here is not to necessarily block entry or to be a roadblock. It's just to make sure that we do what we can in our power to protect our students, our staff members, our community, and make sure that we go about it in a way that we can follow the protocols so that our staff knows what they need to do, what they can't do, and to make sure that we provide that necessary guidance. And so, as I said, we've also provided them reminders on some of the supports that are available if people are concerned, where they can answer questions, what community resources they might be able to out to. And it is a good time as we start the school year to protocols with our staff, as well as other ones that have come up over the last couple of years. That's a very brief kind of 10,000 foot overview, but I'll pause and answer any questions board members might have, or superintendent, do you want to make any additional comments? Okay.
No, we're just happy to field any questions you guys have.
Chase and or Matt, can you say if we have any experience with districts encountering ICE enforcement actions and those enforcement actions not following this protocol and the district declining that enforcement action because the district's protocol was not adhered to?
Sure.
Is there any experience with that you?
No, not that I'm aware of. We've not had experience ICE, to our knowledge, showing up on any of our campuses. And Director Easton, that's one of the reasons we provided resource information to our buildings about if there was perhaps ICE show up at a business or somewhere else in the community, because we understand that that might still impact families inside our school buildings. And so we've tried to help our building principals and leaders prepare for those scenarios too, because more likely than not, that might be what happens, where ICE performs duties at someone's home or at their work, and then the students are left in a precarious position. And so how do we make sure that we're doing what we can to support the students in those circumstances? But to your immediate question, no, we've not had any encounters, to my knowledge, on any of our campuses.
Yeah, and I guess my question was also, do you know of any other districts that have had experience?
Not in Iowa.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's been some different situations in other states, Director Eastham, where those situations have occurred. There is some nuance, of course, to every situation, and so that's part of what Chase is talking about why we counsel about what our obligations in those are. And so I think that's part of why we want to be very cautious and thoughtful in our response. Because I think there are some lessons probably learned from some of those examples. I think the biggest lesson we learned from other districts is, probably a communication. You'll families updating their information into Infinite Campus and contacts, so that if an event was to happen away from school, that we know how to best take care of those students and what are. Sometimes some paperwork gets floated in the community that would give those instructions, but we really need updated into our Infinite Campus student information system so that we can best serve the needs of the students and families at that time. I would say that's one of the number one things we've learned in those scenarios. Not as much about ICE agents on school campuses, but more when it dramatically affects a community's response.
Okay, thank you.
Are instructions given if there's no warrant or subpoena, what the building administrators are supposed to do?
Yes.
Okay.
And we've asked them to reinforce what they have, what we've shared back to them from central office, but we've also given that guidance of, but you're not to impede. We don't want to put you in that standpoint. So we've asked them to reiterate what they've been told, but we don't want to set up a confrontation between our principals and law enforcement.
Well, in that regard, Chase, do we have an idea of what might happen if an ICE agent insists upon the validity of his administrative warrant for addressing a student or a faculty member or an adult inside a building? If an ICE agent actually declines our protocol, which is to act only under a judicial warrant, do we know what would happen then?
I think in that scenario, Charlie, that's probably one of the worst case things we're looking at, correct? Right? Is that we would likely in that circumstance, based on the information you shared, that warrant wouldn't be sufficient for access at school. Then I think what Chase is alluding to, if that ICE agent were to proceed, we're not going to ask our principals to use physical force to impede them or something that way from a confrontation standpoint. That the direction we give and ask the principals to share that information, we would most likely respond on site to the campus at that point too and be in touch with council. So when Chase is talking about we'd relay the information appropriately, it's just what does the ICE agent or what does law enforcement do with that information at that time? We may not be able to affect their response.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I know you're up next again for our presentation tonight for the legislative update.
All right. Well, good evening again. It is that time of year where we our legislative update. Tonight, we'll look at the new legislation from 2025, kind of revisit some things from last year, including Senate File 496 and some pieces from even earlier that still we see have an impact on what we're this legislative session, there were 30 pieces of education-related legislation that were passed and signed by the governor. So, looking at this conservatively tonight, 30 pieces, 3 minutes apiece. I'll be here for about 90 minutes. Okay. No, just kidding. Just kidding. I probably won't meet the goal that I always have with the team that we keep 10 minutes, but I promise we will try not to spend forever this evening. And one of the reasons for that is that throughout the spring, we've been able to have conversations, whether it's at policy and governance or here at the about impactful legislative pieces as we've gone through. So tonight really will be a summary and hit some of those high notes. The Department of Education did publish what it called a letter of the field in July that recapped all these major pieces of legislation. A lot of tonight's information is pulled from that, as well as some of our partners like the Iowa School Board Association, SAI, which is our administrators organization, and our legal counsel provided a webinar. And so we've tried to pull information from several different spots for us to look at this evening. And like I said, we're not going to talk about all of these, going to focus on ones that we already being impactful or could have potentially high impact on students and staff, and even the board. There were some board specific ones this year, and that's actually where we're going to start. We talked about this at P&G a couple ago, and one of the changes they made was to some training for board members around open meetings laws. There were a couple of questions. We found some of those answers. The training looks to be anywhere from 60 to 120 minutes, and it's the state has charged the Iowa Public Information Board with providing at least one free training per year. It's unclear if ISB is going to provide other ones, but we know that IPIB has to provide at least one of those. In terms of some of the other pieces of that, like many of the pieces of legislation after they get enacted, we still have to work out some of the details. And so some of the thoughts that came from ISB on this were about who does it actually apply to? Does it apply to board members that are reelected? And one of the things that was kind of surprising to us is, might it even apply to people that are on committees that have been chartered by the board? So beyond board members, they're still trying to get that answer from IPIB about exactly how broad the scope is of this legislation. And then the other piece of that is it increased fines for board members in or knowingly violate open meetings laws. Of course, that's for other districts because here in Iowa City, but we see that those are potentially up all the way to $12,000 if we knowingly violate. There was also a number of court cases this year, which don't always have these. And our legal counsel has already provided us some guidance on this. And so some of these things you've already seen changes with as we look at how we do our closed meetings. But really, it's a theme of looking at when we have a closed meeting, it needs to be narrowly tailored to the scope of what we're trying to discuss. That we're very clear with our community and transparent on why we're going into a closed session. And so if we need more guidance on that, the superintendent and I are happy to contact legal counsel to set up some additional legal guidance on those pieces. But in review and talking with Board Secretary Colvin, we have pretty much these dialed in as we start our closed sessions. And then the last case that dealt specifically with the board, Supreme Court, and it has to do with social media and school board presence. And so it's not one that we talked about, but one that I found interesting in the webinars I attended. And so how a court would look at whether or not a board member would be speaking in their personal capacity or if they were speaking for the board. Again, not an issue that we've run into here, but something that came up in a couple of different webinars I attended and is germane to what we do as a school district. So I thought I would include it. Those are really the key pieces for the board. Normally I go all the way through, but since these are kind of specific to the board, any quick questions on these before or the regular legislation?
So quick question,
Yeah.
the fine,
Mm-hmm.
is that one that individuals would have to pay or under the umbrella of, I just got our district hit with a $12,000 fine?
That's a great question, and I don't have a specific answer for that. I think, President Malone, it would maybe be circumstance specific, that kind of unknowing versus knowing, and if it was intentional, that might shift that liability. But that's something we can definitely follow up with legal counsel.
Great, thank you.
All right. So, like I said, a lot of these aren't new, and in every legislative session, we find things like, oh my. But every once in a while, we get some good news. And the Senate File 277 on chronic absenteeism, we thought was good news for us. This passed originally in 2024, and in this latest session, they made some revisions. It actually provided some flexibility, some broader terminology in terms of what would be exempt versus non-exempt in terms of absenteeism, which by making that category broader, it means that our students are not subject to chronic absenteeism penalties as quickly as they might otherwise be. So you see some of those extended categories there. A big piece for us in terms of our administrative was the elimination of the requirement to send certified letters. First off, it takes a lot of time. Second, a lot of those come back. And our rough estimate is that we spent $30,000 in postage last year on certified letters alone. And so it was a huge expense that really wasn't something that was being beneficial. So we're appreciative to see that this was taken out. And then on that 15% piece of unexcused absences during the grading period, it gives our building some flexibility to determine if we actually need to have those attendance families. If the board recalls, that's the last step before we start having those conversations with the county attorney about making those referrals. And so again, another opportunity for us to look at the totality of those circumstances and hopefully reduce the number of those referrals to the county attorney's office. I do have that data, and it's not a question right now, but we met with the county attorney earlier in the week. And since 21-22 or 25, we've seen the number of truancy cases that have been referred go from 133 down to 61 last year. And so we've seen a steady decline. And there's a number of factors for that. I would give the most credit to that to Kate Callahan, our principals and our teams that have really leaned into how do we make coming to school a priority and how do we work with families that are finding those barriers. Last year, we did a lot of explanation to our community about what our various letters meant, but we are seeing an impact, and we think it's because of the positive relationships we're being of more families and having their students in school. So we expect to see these numbers continue to go down. The second piece of legislation would be House File 856. We've talked about this a number of times already about the prohibition of diversity, equity, and inclusion offices and officers. You see this list of how the state has defined DEI and some of the practices that we need to eliminate. We've done a lot of work in this area already. And a good example of a program that we thought had been very successful and we're very proud of that we'll know is our Grow Your Own program. Back in 2019, shortly after I came back from Virginia, we rolled out these 4 strands of this Grow Your Own program with an emphasis on bringing more individuals of color into the teacher and administrator ranks. And that would be an example of how that program was designed that would be a violation of this law. And so happy to answer more questions as we get to the end, but I think always it's nice to see an example of maybe what this means in practice. And so that's one that we would highlight for that piece.
Chase, can you indicate if the attorneys have indicated that that's the law?
Yes, and they have.
Thank you.
Is that also for the Educator Rising portion of it, or just for the paraeducator?
Well, so actually, thank you for both those questions, and it's good clarification. We could still have a Grow Your Own program, but it needs to be redesigned as it cannot be based on preferential treatment because of a candidate's race or ethnicity. So we could still have a Grow Your Own program that was open to all all staff members. With Educators Rising, that's open to all students. It is a student group. We don't provide priority to a student based on any protective class. And so that would not be a piece that we would see we need to make any changes to based on this legislation. So thanks for that.
And can I go back to the Senate File
Sure.
277? How are we quantifying negative impact? How do we determine whether or not the absences have been negatively impacting their achievement?
It's a work in progress. That one is left to the Liza, Lucas, Laura, and our building principals to really make that determination. Obviously, we don't want it to have a disparate impact on any group of students, but it was not defined in the law clearly about, so it's a local decision.
Yeah, there might be some subjectivity there. I wonder.
There could be,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
So back to the grow your own
Sure.
idea. So are we willing to entertain the redesign of a program that'll meet the state requirements?
Nick and his team are always looking for creative ways to recruit talent, and the research shows us that 75% of educators come from the communities that they grew up in or where they went to school. And so, yes, Charlie, we need to look at ways to make sure that we continue to attract talent that's already here in a way that continues to meet our goals and our mission and our vision.
Okay, thanks. I'm very much interested in pursuing that. So.
Okay. Director Easton asked about this earlier, Senate File 418. It removed gender identity from the Iowa Civil Rights Act. At our last board meeting, we put this back in our policy. House File 189, non-public student participation extracurriculars. This is something the superintendent has talked about a number of times as a district. We continue to look at ways that we collaborate and cooperate with other institutions to allow their students to take advantage of some of the extracurriculars we have in our district that might not be available to them. This is a big change for us as a system. Senate File 659, student abuse involving a school employee. Every year during our reorganizational meeting, the board has approved what we've called level 1 and level 2 investigators. With the passage of this legislation, we will no longer have to do that in December because we won't be handling those investigations internally. These will be now turned over to the Department of Health and Human Services at the state. So they will be responsible for investigating any claims of student abuse involving a school employee. Nick and his team have been working with the state to learn more about the guidance on this. The rules and regulations are still developed, but we do know a couple of those bullet points that if there is a case that gets picked up by DHHS, we have to immediately place the employee being investigated on leave, and then if there is a founded case, we have to terminate the employee immediately as well. I don't bring that up to say that we wouldn't come to that same conclusion. This just shows how some of those things that were handled internally on a local basis are now being handled at the state level. We also see that DHHS has 30 days to complete the investigation. We've tried to complete investigations, even complex ones, in a much shorter period of time than that. So again, just adjustments as we look at what does that do to staffing, or how do we make sure we continue what we need to do if we'd have an employee out that long. So again, more guidance to come, and as we get that, we're happy to share that with the board. And that last bullet there, we've had a big focus on Title IX here locally as well as across the state and the nation. And so I just thought it was important to point out that simply because DHS takes up this investigation doesn't mean that we are free from other responsibilities under our policies. It just means that those are told or delayed until that would be completed. And that's really a practice we have now. If outside agencies are involved in an investigation, we pause our internal investigations for outside authorities to do their work, and then we pick those back up. Our math curriculum under House File 784.
Director Rainey. Can we take questions on that one?
Sure.
With the bullet point that the district have to immediately place the employee on, is that paid leave or?
Yes. I think we would.
Okay.
We would, yes. Yes. The math instruction bill, 784, so it should look very, this really puts us in a position where the same strategies we've used is really what we'll now kind of replicate on the math side. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it tonight, but Eliza and Lucas will have an opportunity here later in the fall to come back and tell you more of the work that we're doing around these pieces. House File 865, we had a conversation on this at our last P&G meeting. It's changes to our laws around bullying and harassment, and it's really the reverting back to an earlier definition of bullying and harassment from the code. The big change being here, the behavior must be both repeated and targeted. Those were the points that we were kind of reinforced with us in the different webinars, is that the behavior must be repeated and targeted, and it also eliminates the requirement that bullying or harassment. So a student doesn't have to say, well, I'm being bullied because I'm female or because I'm Asian. They can just say, I'm being bullied and harassed. And so we see some of those changes in the law. Another cool thing that came out of the legislative session is the Purple Star School Initiative. It's an opportunity for schools that support military families and students recognized. The application process is still being developed. We shared this with our admin at our admin council meeting last week. We have some schools that are interested in pursuing this when it does become available, but it's something you apply for, and we're still waiting to get the information what that application process looks like. Religious instruction, civics tests, and post-secondary instruction. These are related to what we're doing instructionally during the school day. House File 870 on religious instruction reiterates a right that our students already have, guaranteed by a Supreme Court case from half a century ago, as well as board policy, that students may be excused from the school day to participate in religious instruction. The civics test is new. We do not have from the state how many questions are going to be on the civics test. Lucas and Brady and I were actually talking about this earlier as we game plan how this will roll out. But again, we don't have that guidance yet. The good news is it doesn't start this year. As you see, it's not required until the graduating class of 26, 27, and they have to score a 60%. Can take it as many times as they want. But, you know, we're already trying to think through, okay, well, if the test is only 10 questions, do we offer it during this class period? But if it's 100 questions, how long are they going to need, and how do we set that up? So we already have the gears working on what that might look like, but we just don't have enough details. And then the post-secondary instruction, this is something we're excited about. It goes along with a lot of the work we've talked about in terms of what we're doing in this building. Lucas had an opportunity to present on some of these pieces a while ago, and as we learn more and further develop these, we'll definitely bring back more information on what we're doing in that area. Human growth curriculum, Senate File 175. This is an C. Again, we're still trying to work through exactly how we will implement the changes into our curriculum. You see in that second bullet, some of the now required instructional materials that we must utilize, including videos and visuals, specifically an ultrasound video that shows the development of the organs during fetal development. And then that third bullet talks about limitations of where we can get materials. And so we are doing a review with Carmen Guinagali, our curriculum director, and our health teachers about, okay, where are we getting our materials from to make sure that we stay in compliance with the law. And then there is a specific parent opt-out available for this course unit that we have to incorporate. We already have an opt-out process on our website available for families to utilize, so we have that in place. I mean, not specific to this, but we already have a process in place that could follow in that regard. And then a big one at the state level this year, but we were leading the way here in Iowa City, was the cell phone bill. And so what highlighted there is that we adopted our policy in December of last year. And so thank you for the board's work and leadership that. And as our policy was already in effect and the state moved to make this law into law, we saw that what we were doing was already compliant. The one change to bring to the board, if you remember from last year when we started this, we had the kids come to the office and we really kind of just recorded the violations in a book, and there was no discipline nature of it. That was intentional on our part. We are trying to really be more efficient and effective in the systems that we have. So we are going to start recording these in Infinite Campus, but we are still just documenting them. They will not be discipline infractions. So it's just an easier way for us to capture the data and to be able to have that and to present that out. Lucas and the tech team have been working on it, and he told us today they've got it figured out. So we're excited to see that going to be able up and running at the beginning of the year. But just a reminder, yes, you might hear that we are capturing Infinite Campus, which is true, but it still will not be disciplinary. Our school safety assessment team, this is one the board has heard about as well. I'll start with that orange bullet at the end. This is an optional for the district. We have not brought it to policy and governance yet. We wanted to wait until the school year got started. We had an ability to make this presentation. But what this bill does is it allows for a school district to basically form a care assessment or a threat assessment team like we have in place, but to incorporate organizations from the community, including law enforcement. And this provides an umbrella for information sharing so that if we shared student identifiable information, we wouldn't be violating FERPA. If we want to put a team like this in place, the board would have to adopt the policy that is associated with this bill. We have that ready to go. Like I said, we were just holding on to it this summer to bring it back to the board for further discussion and further consideration as we get into the fall. So I'm not going to spend a lot more time on that, but I'm happy to answer if there's any specific questions, but please know this is something the board would have to approve, and we do have it slated for immunization exemptions. Jess is going to presentation on measles after I wrap up my time here, and so I won't really do this one or either, but no questions on that if you have it. And then Title IX. We've been in front of you a couple of different times in the last couple of years about Title IX, and the reality is we did all that, and then we got a ruling earlier in the year that the new regulations are not going into effect. And so what we want you to know, what we want the community to know is that the district regulations are currently up to date, and they conform to the 2020 by the U.S. Department of Education, not the 2024 standards that were struck down. At our admin council last week, we had about an hour session with our elementary and then a different one with our secondary with an outside presenter to come in and do some training with our admin on Title IX. The HR team has some additional training set up that are going to be more targeted at some of the different roles with some additional individuals inside the organization. And so we will continue to train our principals, and other leaders on this work. So that's it for 2025, but I'm going to take a couple minutes to visit a couple of things from the past. 604, investigations of violence in classrooms. If you remember, the law changed and it requires our building administrators to notify parents within 20 hours of an incident that results in violence, property damage, or assault by a student. And so once the classroom teachers tell the building administrator then has 24 hours to call both of the students or all the students involved in the incident. And I should have said, the same pieces we're going over with you all tonight, we went over with our admin. That's one reason we want to also get to see the reminder last week as part of this update. And then House File 2612, teacher pay. Thank you to the board for your support during negotiations. Made efforts to be competitive across the state and the region in terms of pay. And it was a 2-year implementation plan, and this is the second year, where as of July 1st of this year, all starting teacher salaries across the state were at $50,000. Last year, I only bring this next one up because, again, it required board action. 586. We passed a resolution last May to opt out of the ability to arm employees in schools or to have SROs in our high school buildings. And then the big one from 2 years ago was House File 496, the Educational Omnibus Bill. And I have to be honest, I'm going to show you here a timeline on the left and the current school impact on the right. I was talking to the superintendent and to Brady. I was like, this has been through so many iterations. I even have trouble of keeping track of where we. It's good for us to have reminders of what's going on. So, up to speed on 4. There on the right, the current school impacts. We do not have to exclude books based on appropriateness. The parental notification piece, if you remember the original legislation, was for any time, I believe it was worded, any time a student asks for a gender affirming accommodation. And the court narrowed it to only having to notify parents if the accommodation is for different pronouns. The next two bullets also talk to a piece that was originally very broad in terms of at the elementary pre-K 6, there couldn't be any instruction or curriculum related to gender identity, but also promotion, or it was a very broad range of what we couldn't do. And the court has currently narrowed that down to not only not being able to provide lessons or instruction on gender identity and sexual orientation, and we may operate our our GSAs and other gender affirming clubs at the elementary level. And then the only thing I'd say about on the left is that currently there is a bill pending in front of the 8th Circuit by the state regarding this this last ruling by the district court. So we still don't have a firm answer on where we are on any of these. We can try to keep our building personnel, administrators, and our families up to date on where it is, and so we'll continue to watch it. Promise, I'm almost finished. Just a couple of pieces from even before 2020 or 23 and before. The school restroom bill that required that we designate our group restrooms either male or female, and then utilization based on the person's sex assigned at birth. And why we reference these again is that seen in this year's legislation that's passed some cross-referencing to a couple of these pieces, and so we've seen the legislature come back around to these. And on Senate File 92, the Ed Savings Accounts or the voucher bill, if you remember this year implementation cycle, and this year as we begin, there was no income restriction on vouchers or who could. Open enrollment, we're always concerned about where open enrollment was. Modified change a couple years ago, but back to that March 1st deadline. And then kind of a different year, but like the bathroom bill, the governor's bill several years ago on athletic eligibility based on sex. Again, we saw that cross-referenced in this legislative session as they look to align terms. And so pieces that we continue to try to keep our administration in the loop on as the school year starts. And then way back to 2021, right as we came out of COVID, 3 bills that we focused on and have relevance still today: the Pledge of Allegiance, the flag is visible, and we say the pledge in every single one of our buildings. And then House File 744 related to free speech, and then House File 802 on the parameters of professional development related to racism and sexism. This relates to the DEI bill that we saw the legislature pass this year. And so the next slide contains a couple of different detailed bullet points on each one of those, but we include them because they might be 3 or 4 years old. We've seen them reflected in legislative pieces that were brought forward during this year's legislative session. So I will take any other questions. I apologize. I know I got quick, but I made the joke about and then I felt like I was talking a long time. So I wanted to speed up a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Board directors, are there any questions?
Sure. Thank you for that overview, Chase. So a couple of quick questions, then a larger one. For the athletic participation, do we have any idea about numbers of students that we might be seeing accessing our athletic teams?
You mean related to
Sorry, to
House File
House File
2416?
189, House File 189.
On the open enrollment.
Yeah.
Do we have a number on that right now?
I can tell you an exact number, probably a couple hand. Our district as well as their institution, their school, and we do charge a fee for students that participate to offset some costs due to coaching, transportation, or uniforms.
And how much is the fee? Does that depend on the sport? Or?
Adam, what is it, $250, $300 per activity?
Okay. Thank you. For the Senate File 92, the $1,200, is that just a one-year thing for the first time that they're accessing the savings account? Is that just for that first year, or is that?
On what we get back
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
district? Adam, that's a finance question.
It's not just
It's
he can get it. Well, I think our skepticism, I would say, with that long term, and then I'll let it, is if that money continues, right? So there's a piece that the district receives now on an annual basis, and Adam can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that that is going to always continue, right? And so that was kind of a give to districts at the time. But Adam, any other specifics on that $1,200?
Yeah, I would just say that $1,200 amount does increase with SSA in general because it reflects the amount tied to certain categorical funding that we get per student. My uncertainty is and has been, continues to be, are we going to continue to get that down the road?
Okay, all right, thank you. And then I get a lot of questions about this. I know there are people here watching us in the audience that probably want more details on this as well. I wonder, can you clarify for the public what sort of impact our district, our students, our parents, our teachers are going to see as a result of House File 856? Like what can we no longer do? What will we still be able to do? For example, I know under our former equity department, some things that we will continue to do are community outreach, restorative justice, bullying prevention. But what sort of impact will this be having on our day-to-day and what our students and teachers and parents will notice? Do we have any specifics that you could?
Well, I think, we gave one example in terms of the Grow Your Own program. For a long time, we have required our building administrators to interview one candidate of color for every position, or provide rationale of why a candidate of color was not invited in for an interview. Practices like that will no longer be allowed under the position. As we talked about earlier in the spring, we had to basically, as it said, dismantle our equity department, and so that doesn't mean that that we're not still committed to our vision of being all in for all kids, but there are certain things that says here that we're going to be restricted from doing, and so giving you a list of examples of all the little bit difficult, but I think these bullets do are clear, or give us some guidance in terms of what we need to look at our programs against to make sure that that's not happening. And so we're not going to be able to put policies or procedures in place that create preferential treatment, or that would even encourage our buildings to give preferential treatment based on a student's race or a staff member's race. And so really, I think where we see this is that's what we have to do, is we have to look at some of the practices and make sure that they're not doing any of these things. In terms of specific examples, Matt, are there any other ones you want to offer? Yeah, Laura.
Hello, can you all hear me? Something that's really, I think, reassuring is that we didn't have many programs that were targeted because of race in the first place, right? So Chase named the Grow Our Own, used to specifically mention that we were going to try to get a certain amount of staff of color that would participate. On the student end, there literally were probably 3 programs that were specifically targeted for students who were in need. I hate to use the term at risk or whatever, but we were focusing on them. So there wasn't much. The majority of what we were doing anyway was to impact all students or the highest need students. So we're really lucky that we didn't have to shift a lot of things because we weren't specifically targeting one group in the first place, except for in a couple of pocket areas. So, we're still going to service all of our kiddos and get to those students who are at risk with bullying and harassment prevention, restorative practices, threat assessment, and some other things that we're putting in place on the proactive end to help our teachers be more confident with the classroom environment. So that's I'm happy to say that we are still taking care of our even though we're not targeting any particular.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, I'd just say thank you for that, Laura, as well. I think honestly, a lot of this comes from just a general misunderstanding of what we do for students, that we all the time, we try to target based on need, just like Laura's talking about. And so I think when we see policies like this come, I think there's just a general misunderstanding of how our system's designed, how our MTSS system works, and how we figure out support for kids and how we find resources to the legislation specific to, like Laura and Chase have talked about, no preference based on race. Most of the programs we or anything along those lines because of their race. So great answer in terms of how we look at this and how we try to deliver services to our students. Otherwise, Chase has detailed out pretty much the examples. We've worked on those examples with legal counsel, and the final clarification I'd provide is that our student affiliate groups can continue. So our BSUs, all of those things, they're still able to be in place and still operate.
Will we be able to recognize in our schools days and months, for example, Hispanic Heritage, those types of things?
Yeah, our cultural representation days
Yes.
stay in effect on our calendar. We'll continue to have those posts where we celebrate heritage and ethnicity of folks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any additional questions from directors? I just had a final question for you, and it goes back to Senate File 659, student abuse involving school employees. Is there any education being provided to our staff, teachers? Because this is a change, and hypothetically, if they have heard how we have previously handled these, it'll be a shock where they're like, wait, what?
The short answer is yes, with the caveat of not yet. As I mentioned, we provided this slide deck to our administrators and one are aware of these changes. But we're still waiting to have clarity from the Department of Health and Human Services about what their protocol might actually look like. So we are going to provide some guidance on, hey, this is going to change about who's going to conduct these, but we just don't have the how on that yet to be able to communicate that to them.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that ends your time, so thank you. And that takes us to our measles presentation.
All right, I'm going to welcome Jess Jimerson up to the podium here. Jess is going to walk you through a little bit about Iowa immunization law and measles, as we've seen confirmed cases in the state and throughout the country. We wanted to talk to you, of course, about this as we approach time and welcome several people back to our buildings. We've been working collaboratively with Johnson County Health Department. As you're all intimately aware, we've got some experience doing this and collaborating with the health department, and so Jess and her team have done a great job of trying to get us up to speed. Wanted to share that same information with the board and community. Go ahead, Jess.
Good evening. First, I tell you that when Chase asked me to come speak to you tonight, I did have flashbacks to 2020. I said, I'm happy to come, but oh my goodness. But I promise not to keep you the extra 90 minutes that this will be brief and quick. But yeah, so immunizations, you've probably heard a lot about that on the There it goes. So we're going to start with what we require from families. The law requires us to families to submit before they enroll their students. That can be in the form of an immunization certificate, a religious exemption, medical exemption, or provisional certificate of immunization. As everything, there's a few exceptions to that rule. Students that are homeless under the McKinney-Vento Act, or students who have a family member that's an active duty military, they can enroll before we receive those immunization records. However, our nurses will work with those families to either obtain their records, help them make appointments, or to get the immunizations, or offer the exemptions if that's something they're interested in. So what's required for schools? Our nurses are back in school and they are reviewing all of the immunization records for every student in the district. We have to make sure that they have at minimum 1 dose of every vaccine. If they have at least 1 dose of each vaccine series, they can write a provisional certificate that next dose of immunization in every series. Then once they get that next dose, they'll get another provisional to get 6 until their final dose is due. It's kind of ongoing until they receive every dose. What's required for staff? Right now, Iowa law does not address vaccine requirements for staff working in K-12. Not required to maintain records for school staff. However, Iowa HHS is recommending all staff be fully vaccinated, or at the very least, be aware of what their vaccine status is. You know, locate their records, know whether they're. So, measles. According to Johnson County Public Health, in June of 25, we had 4 positive cases in our county. One was a unimmunized child that was traveling, and then the additional 3 were family household contacts to that initial case. Symptoms of measles start out as a runny nose, watery eyes, cough. It'll be a fever, and the fever tends to get really high. Public Health did say the fever can get up to 104, but it doesn't necessarily stay there. It kind of fluctuates, but it does have a really high fever with it. Koplik spots, which are the little white dots inside your mouth, may appear 2 to 3 days after the first symptom. And then 2 to 4 days later, you'll find they'll develop a rash. The rash looks different than the chickenpox rash. Chickenpox tend to look more like pustule. They look like blisters. This is more like a flat raised. It's raised, but it's not rounded. It's kind of a flat rash, and it starts up at the top of your head and works down your body, across your extremities. They said if you ever have an individual, Public Health shared with us yesterday, that if you have an individual, very indicative of measles, that if it's on top of their ears. The rash disappears just like it came. It disappears from the head down. And then how's it spread? It's spread by air droplets from the nose, mouth of the infected person. And an individual can be contagious with measles 4 days start and 4 days after they subside. How soon will symptoms appear after exposure? The average incubation period for measles is about 10 to 12 days, with symptom onset ranging from 7 to 21 days after exposure. So if you think you've been exposed or you suspect you may be infected with measles, Public Health is asking that individuals don't go to the clinic. They want you to call your healthcare provider to make arrangements to get tested. They don't want individuals to go. That'll just create additional. If we have a positive case of measles identified in school, Public Health will contact us immediately. They'll likely know immediately because it is a report. So they're going to be notified. They'll contact the school nurse. We'll get district administrators and the building administrators involved, and then follow their lead. They'll determine which students and staff are non-immune to ensure all susceptible individuals are excluded from school. Non-immune meaning that they either haven't had history of the illness themselves or they're not vaccinated. Non-immune students and staff will be required under public health order to stay home for 21 days after the last possible exposure to Iowa HHS reports that all non-immune students and staff will be excluded following the above guidance, even if they're not identified initially as being a positive case. Once they have time to investigate further and identify the positive exposures, people will be able to return back to class in school. So how are we preparing? I actually just had public health in yesterday speaking with our school nurses, and they provided some training on what symptoms look like, what we should do. School nurses are currently, as I mentioned, reviewing all station records, and we're compiling lists of students that we either have exemptions for, not fully vaccinated, or measles. That'll just be easy access for us to identify students that are not immunized. We're encouraging staff and volunteers to know their vaccine status and contact their healthcare providers to discuss options or vaccine status. We utilize our district sign-in system to track staff and volunteers that are in and out of our buildings. And then, as always, we'll continue to collaborate with Johnson County Public Health as things evolve and I'm in contact with them very regularly. And then with that, if you have questions or anything, I'd be happy to answer to the best of my ability.
Yeah, I just have one question. What about students that are coming to us from other countries and their immunization records may look different or may be hard to find? Is there something we can do there?
Yep. If they come to us from another country, they have to follow the same laws, but happens actually very, very frequently. We have a wonderful translation and interpretation department, and we submit those records to them, and they get it translated for us. And it's actually relatively quick. We have a lot of great people that work with us, and so we get those back as quickly as we can so that we know what their records are.
So if they just have their parent is saying, yes, they got it, that's not enough.
They need proof of it.
Proof of it, okay.
Yep.
And so then if they don't have it, then we get them to resources where they can get it, I assume.
Correct. Yep. That they're excluded from school because they have to have one dose of all series. And so, and our nurses work diligently to find appointments, and we have our Healthy Kids clinics that we can get them in. And so we try to get them vaccinated as quickly as possible.
I have a question. If we have a staff that needs because of exposure, do we have any idea about what our sub pool is, like our pools for subs, Matt, or other? Do we have any concerns about need?
I think we'd have a concern dependent upon the number we'd be talking. Right now, day-to-day sub fill rates are excellent. I mean, we're doing a nice job of being able to handle that, or we close the year being able to be in a good position to start the school year. I think, just like the last pandemic we talked about, depending on the level and the scale, that's where things would get difficult potentially for us. And so I think in a realistic fashion, if you had a really intense situation at one building, that could be difficult. But general illness, general staff vacancies, we're fine filling those.
When students are excluded from school, are we able to provide instructional support during that period of time?
Yeah, we would not provide, instruction day to day, Charlie, in that situation. But of course, teachers would be in communication. Building office staff would be in communication with parents to try to get them work and try to have them maintain their academic progress, to the best extent possible during that period.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Manager Jemison, and my apologies for my need to exit during your presentation, but thank you. And next up is our action item for tonight, which is the policy primers that we heard about earlier on the agenda. There's no questions or comments. I would entertain a motion.
I move we approve the policy primers as presented on this agenda.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
Yeah, mine still isn't popping up, so I'm a yay.
Thank you, Director Malone.
I'm a vote, Kim.
Thank you, Director Finch. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all.
Thank you. And that takes us to our upcoming events and community updates. So we have director liaison reports. Are there any items that directors would like to highlight on their report from this cycle? Okay, then we'll jump right into agenda setting. Our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, August 26th, and we will start with policy and governance, where policy 200.3 R1, responsibility of directors, and the 100 series policies will be discussed. That meeting is slated to start at 5:30 still. Okay. And then immediately following, well, at 6 o'clock that same night, we will have our regularly scheduled board meeting. I'm just trying to scroll down and it's not working. We will see policy reviews and Superintendent Degner, any idea on some of the discussion items and presentation?
Yeah, we have a pretty light agenda tonight. We wanted to try to some of the big items to you guys this evening before we approach the first day of school. I think definitely for a discussion item, we'll do a first day of school review and try to give you an update about basically how the first 2 days will have occurred. The teacher professional development and service days leading up to the first. So Brady mentioned we welcomed new teachers today, but our veteran and career teachers will be back next week. So we'll be able to review a few of those things.
Great, thank you. And it's just a reminder, directors, feel free to pass along future board meeting topics to myself, Superintendent Degner, or Vice President Abraham for the parking lot, Director Finch.
Yeah, for the parking lot. At some point, I'd like to take a look at our HRS and how our staff feels that it's working, what we could do better, what's working well. So some, maybe an ed committee meeting perhaps. Okay.
I'm sorry, Jane, could you, I didn't catch the.
Oh, sorry, an overview of our HRS and
HRS,
our
okay, thank you.
how our educators are
Great, thank
perceiving whether it's helpful or not, or where we could make improvements. So.
I think that's a good idea.
Great. Anything else? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a good night.